Today's video is brought to you by Glass Spider Publishing. Offering a wide range of hybrid book publishing services, Glass Spider Publishing is your one-stop shop for professional editing, design, publication, and book marketing services. Visit glassspiderpublishing.com today to learn more. Welcome back, everyone. For today's painting, I'm using a 12 by 16 inch canvas board. And as always, you can use absolutely any size, shape, type, color of canvas that you like. You can add gesso if you like. I did not prepare this canvas in any way at all. I'm starting out with my number 12 Filbert. It's an excellent brush to cover the canvas with, nice and quick. I'm loading up with a little bit of Diox purple with a hint of cadmium orange in it, just to kind of tamp down the purple, make it a little on the grayer side. And of course, a lot of matte medium because I want it nice and transparent. As you can tell, I did not put enough medium in here, so it's quite a bit darker than I actually want, but you'll see I take care of that in just a minute. When you're doing your underpainting, as always, remember that you do not have to worry about it looking beautiful. The color doesn't have to be even. It doesn't have to, you don't have to get rid of all the brush marks. Really just make sure that you're covering all of the white specks and make sure you don't have any paint blobs that are going to cause texture as you go about your painting. That's really all I'm looking for here. Now the purple that I've chosen is really going to help support all of the colors in this painting, particularly the colors in the sky and the water. I wanted to make sure that I got the look that I wanted in the sky and the water, keep everything kind of smoky and smooth. But if I had to worry about covering the white of the canvas along with that, I felt like the sky and the water would be too bulky. I'd have to focus on applying so much paint to get those specks gone. As you can see here, I just took a clean, dry paper towel and I just kind of wiped it a bit. That's about how you want to do an underpainting. The transparency, the pale color. You don't want a thick, heavy color necessarily. I've moved to my number 8 Filbert, and I loaded up with a lot of medium and then just grabbed a little bit of Payne's Gray. And I'm going to sketch out my composition here real quick. Just make sure that your paint is nice and transparent because it'll be easier to cover up later. If that paint is super thick and heavy, you're going to struggle to cover it up. Just sketching out my horizon and some hillsides. I didn't really have a lot of an idea for this. I like to paint little rivers and bodies of water. If you've noticed, I've been doing that a lot lately. And I kind of had the idea to do this one that very asymmetrical, that kind of goes off the corner like that. And I knew that I wanted to do something slightly fall feeling, but just as like misty and kind of moody, but also colorful. So those are kind of the parameters I started with. It's not like I started with a picture or anything. So I'm just kind of experimenting with shapes here. And if you're using your paint as thin as I'm using it, mine here, you really can just kind of scribble all over the canvas until you find the shapes that you want. So don't be hesitant, don't be afraid, just get in there and figure out where you're going to have some shadows. Figure out where you're going to have some shapes. Just keep everything very, very thin. Notice I'm using the side of my brush and kind of scumbling. I'm not using the flat part of my brush. The reason for that is that when you use the flat part of your brush, right there I did, but notice how thick that paint went down. That's why I'm using the side, so that I can keep it nice and thin and I can kind of fog it out when I need. I only go onto the flat when I need to lay down a thicker application of paint. Wasn't sure what was going to go on with that hill on the right side there. If the river was going to disappear behind it or pop out somewhere else. Really had no idea what was going on over there. Get out your blow dryer at this point. Make sure that's all completely dry, because now I'm going to go even darker. So I'm using my same brush, still loading up with medium, but picking up a slightly heavier concentration of the Payne's Gray. So at this point, I'm darkening areas that I've decided I want to be dark shadows, and then just kind of expanding from there. If you feel like you've got everything laid out just fine after the first layer, you don't have to do a second layer of your dark here. I like to spend a lot of time in this phase and really push the painting so that it's completely readable. As you know, the idea that I have, you can look at it and say, oh, here's what's going on in this painting. I like to get it to that point in this phase, but stop short of detail. So when I feel like there's nothing else I can really do in this phase, except for start to add detail, then I know I'm ready to move on to my color. Just getting some of my reflections in there for the where there's going to be a tree, and then the grasses and whatever else is happening on top of this hill. Just getting some of that shadow or a reflection in there. So the point of doing this, I know it may seem like extra work that's unnecessary since we're going to put color over top of it, but a lot of this dark that I'm putting on is what's going to show ultimately. I might put a little bit of color over it, but it's going to be in the final painting. You'll be able to see it. But also it helps support those shadows. So if I'm painting with color and I'm going in there to put in this dark shadow area onto, let's say, a white canvas, because you also didn't do an underpainting, you're going to struggle more to get that dark shadow in there than you will if you do an underpainting like this and then paint in your values first. So you really can change any of this. If I decide that one of these big dark areas I actually want to be lighter, the vast majority of light colors are opaque anyway, so it will cover it. But now when I go back to work in those dark areas, I have to do very little work, very, very little work. I get asked a lot about, did you paint onto wet paint or did you paint onto dry paint? So I'm going to try and show you whenever I use my hair dryer to dry something. So let's make sure that underpainting is completely dry. We're now ready for some color. So I'm sticking with my number 8, and I'm picking up just a little tiny bit of cadmium yellow light with a tiny bit of cad orange, mostly white. I want this to be very, very pale sunny color. Just a little bit of medium. Using the side of my brush again, I'm going to decide where I want the brightest part of the sky and start gently scumbling that in. The purple showing through, I really love. I think that it makes that yellow pop just a little bit extra. I know that sounds weird. It should seem like on a white canvas that it would stand out and be very bright, but I think the opposite is true. Little extra of the yellow mixture in there. And don't avoid your dark underpainting. You don't have to butt up against it and stop. Overlap it, absolutely. In a day like this, where you've got some trees that are being backlit from a very bright sky, you're going to be able to see the colors through the tree, whether it's the color of the sky or the light or whatever it is. So if you stop and kind of paint around those tree shades, it's going to feel really, really tight and super artificial. But by letting everything kind of overlap, then it feels like a misty day that's got really bright light reflected in the air. And I think it just looks a little bit more natural. A little heavier on the orange there, and continuing. And just nudge into the previous color, those lighter colors, and overlap them. Very light pressure here. Tiny bit of purple just because it kind of tamps down that orange and keeps it from being so sour. Makes it a little bit more natural. Diox purple and cadmium orange, one of my very favorite color mixtures. If you've never mixed the two together, I highly recommend it. They make very magical colors. Both of the trees in this painting are mixtures of those two paints. And this right here is my orange tree, the first tree. More purple, nice dark color. And we'll start painting the other tree. I had a little bit too much paint and water on that brush, so I just wiped it off a bit. If you're applying too much paint and it's very opaque, then it's one of a couple things, potentially all three of them. You either have too much water in your brush, or you've picked up too much paint, or you're putting too much pressure on your brush. So just make sure your brush is fairly dry, you don't have a huge amount of paint, and you're using very soft pressure. Just mixed a little bit of white into that color mixture. And a little bit more in the background there. Definitely overlapping the tree like we talked about before. Just a nice, cool, hazy color on the horizon. Kind of gives you the sense of atmospheric perspective where the atmosphere is a little bit thicker, visually thicker toward the horizon. Tiny bit of white, tiny bit of cerulean, very, very pale blue. It almost reads as white. It's very, very pale. I'm applying it very transparent. A lot of that purple underpainting still shows. Make sure you overlap everything, your trees, as well as the other colors that you've put in the sky. All right, sticking with my number 8, we're going to start working on the ground and the water. I picked up some medium and then a tiny bit of cobalt teal. There are a million teal colors on the market. It doesn't have to be cobalt teal. Any color that you look at, it's opaque, you think it looks teal, works just fine. If you don't have one and you don't want to go buy one, if you take like phthalo turquoise, which is just phthalo blue with a tiny bit of phthalo green in it, and add some white, then you've basically got a teal color. I'm also mixing a little bit of cerulean in there because the cerulean is warmer than the teal and it's ever so slightly darker. So I'm kind of building from a darker blue toward green. So the cerulean is nice on the base of that. Just kind of nudging it throughout the ground. Definitely overlapping my shadow color, but this color is pretty thin, so I'm not losing anything that I'm covering. By pulling my brush stroke from the edge of the canvas kind of down at an angle toward the water, I create the illusion that the ground there is on a hill. If I were doing my brush strokes very flat like I am there in the distance, then it would read more as flat land. So it's just a little trick. One of the easy ways that you can make your ground look like a hill, do your brush strokes on an angle. I did add just a tiny bit of yellow to that color, as you can tell, just a little bit. Just keeping my brushwork nice and loose there, not fading everything out, letting some of my brush marks show. A little more yellow. In the distance there, I don't want it to be terribly green, because remember, as things move away from us, they get grayer and they get less saturated. So I have some green back there now, but I am going to tamp it down with some of the cerulean later. Keep the brighter greens in the foreground. A little more yellow. Just very slowly working toward that bright color. Just adding a bit more of that bluish color back there. There's a hint of green in my brush, but I mix quite a bit of cerulean in there. And you don't really get a nice bright green with cerulean. You'll get a nice grayed down tone. Now there I've got a little bit of cobalt mixed with a little bit of diox, mixed with a little bit of white. Kind of a periwinkle color. It's very pale. And I wanted to get rid of, not get rid of, but kind of give a little bit of color to this dark shadow I've got in the sky. Just a little bit more of a misty, foggy color. Could be interpreted as distant trees and things like that, or just a cloud bank, or whatever it is that you want to see it as. Don't be afraid, go over top of that tree. You're not going to lose it. It's not going to look weird. Just get over top of that tree, I promise. And here, I know a lot of people are hesitant to mix yellow and blue in their sky. You know, they don't want to get green in their sky, but I have no problem with that. I'm fine seeing green in the sky. But also I think that when it's in the transition, when you're overlapping blue to yellow or blending blue to yellow, as long as it's just like in a little bit of a transitional area, I don't think it really reads as green. It just looks like the transition from blue to yellow. So don't be afraid of that. Even if it is green, it doesn't matter. Some of that sunny light color again, and just straight up and down, roughly right underneath the light color in the sky. It doesn't have to be perfectly directly underneath, but keep your brush strokes mostly straight up and down and very, very thin and soft. And we'll branch out to some warmer, brighter colors on either side. Tiny bit of purple just to keep that orange under control. That orange could very easily become overpowering and be the standout color in the painting, and I didn't want that. So that's why I'm adding just tiny bits of the Diox to it, because it just, if you don't add too much, it just takes the edge off that brightness. Clean brush, a little bit of white, and back into our blue. I'm deepening the blue just a little bit in the water. It's going to be just a little bit more blue than it actually is in the sky. Still straight up and down, blurring it into that underpainting color. And overlapping that orange. Absolutely, do not keep them separate. Work very thin and you'll be able to see everything through everything else, and it will look like it belongs together. See, lots more cerulean for this corner. Clean brush back into my orange-purple mixture. We're going to get a little bit of some, I don't know, however you choose to interpret them, bushes or rocks or whatever. I felt like I needed a little extra of this orange here and there throughout the grounds. So I've got a little orange shape there, and I'll put a reflection of that in the water. There's a lot of just painting by feeling here. I decide that I want to see something. It doesn't have to make sense. I put it there, and that's the way that it is. And I just want you guys to feel confident to do things like that too, to make those kinds of decisions. Just little dabs of this brownish color all throughout. Same shadowy orange color, just getting some shadows up there in that orange tree. Every time I go darker, I apply less and less of it. I'm keeping it on the right-hand side of that tree. Just mixing up a little bit more of that color. And again, dabbing it here and there just helps keep the ground from turning into a big blue-green mass. Just keeps a little bit of interest in there. A little bit darker, more purple. And let's work on this purple tree on the left a bit. Holding my brush pretty far back, working nice and loose, very soft pressure. I'm going to zoom you in here in just a second because I want to show you how everything is overlapping and show you that I can see the texture of my canvas. All of those are things that I know sometimes people struggle with. You see texture in your canvas and you feel like you must not be applying enough paint. You absolutely are. It's okay. Okay, I'm now using my number 4 Filbert. This is still my long handle stiff bristle brush Filbert. I'm mixing up a little bit of that sky color, some blue and some cerulean, and a good amount of medium. I still want to keep it a bit on the transparent side. We're just going to amp up the blue in the sky a bit. Just plop down a little bit of paint with the flat of the brush up on the side to fuzz it out, make everything look very, very soft. Here, I'm going to pull you in close now and show you exactly how much paint is coming off and how far into this tree I'm overlapping. Plop down a little blob of paint and fuzz it out right into that tree. So see, don't be afraid. Get in there, overlap those colors. Get some of that sky color in your tree. You would see the sky through the leaves of a tree anyway. And that's how you create that illusion. Cleaned off my brush, back into my yellow, just a teeny tiny bit of yellow, a teeny hint of orange just to really warm it up. And a good bit of white, so it's a nice pale sunny color. We're going to start building some of the brightness in the sky. Much smaller movements, still very soft brushwork. I really want to make it seem like this light is shining through this orange tree. So I'm taking it into the tree, and I am keeping my brushwork with a little bit sharper edges where that bright color is inside the tree, so that it looks like there's a bright light shining through leaves that are kind of blocking it. With the softer colors that aren't emitting quite so much light, you want to keep the edges soft where it overlaps the trees, but the bright light, you do need a little bit of some sharper edges. Warm it up again with a bit more orange. nice and warm there toward the base of the horizon. I think I had intended on making that purpley area back there a distant grove of trees, and so I was trying to pop some little light bursts so that it looked like light shining through some trees, but then I decided I didn't want to go back to it and put energy into it like that, so I just left it. But I think it can be interpreted however you like. Most delicate touch. You saw I just loaded up with some paint. There's almost nothing coming off of my brush there. Clean brush back into my cerulean white mixture. And just once more popping some of that blue. I also felt like that yellow kind of got away from me. It expanded way too far out into the sky. So I'm just going to come and kind of nudge it back down a little bit. See, if you look at that overlap spot between the blue and the yellow, if you isolate it, it does kind of look a little green. But I think when you look at it as a whole, it does not read as green. I'm using that exact same brush load of paint, that sky blue color, and just adding a little bit more in the water, mostly where I left quite a bit of purple, and then just kind of taking back a little bit of some of those reflections that might have gotten too big, just adding a little bit of sky over them. Nice and horizontal back there in the distance, that little river part. I kind of saw the larger body of water, almost like a pond or something, with a little bit of a stream feeding into it, and it kind of gave it a little waterfallish type marks toward the end of the painting. If I had planned it out a little bit better, I might have given it more of some splashy zones, little waterfall bits, but it was not something I had planned out. Kind of reserving that spot there that you see for the tree reflection color. So I've still kind of got that purple spot in the middle there. Clean brush. Let's go ahead and get that reflection color in there for the tree. I'm going to make it a little bit darker because I also just feel like there's a lot of shadow in the reflections there. The sun isn't hitting the water in that area. So I threw a little bit of the Payne's Gray in there as well. I even threw just a little bit of yellow in there to kind of press down the purple a bit. I wanted something that read a bit more as brown. Nice and soft, and streak it. Nothing streaks paint so good as your finger. A little bit of medium just helps smear it so it's nice and transparent. This big dark area is kind of hard to read. It's kind of hard to tell where the land starts and where the water starts, where they meet. But notice I'm not really worried about that right now. There's a really simple trick to separating the dark shadow reflection in the water from the dark shadow of the land above it. And we're going to do that toward the end. It's super quick, it's super easy, and it's super effective. Just going to work this shadow mixture in here and there throughout the water. Also pay attention to the land there on the left. If you notice, I'm starting to get these little alcoves in the land that look very similar to the other little alcoves. So I end up with like 3 little alcoves and little hilly bumps that look exactly the same. And I don't really even notice it until the next day I finish the painting. The next day I notice it, but we're gonna fix it. It took me about 2 minutes to fix that weird little repeaty bump area. So don't worry about it if you've got things like that coming. Just go with it. We'll take care of it later. I'm going to go to my 5/8 inch angle, and I'm picking up my teal color, a little bit of medium, just to keep things on the slightly transparent side, a little bit of cerulean just to deepen that color. And we're going to work on making this look like kind of overgrown grasses. And I'm not going in and doing like grass type brush marks really, but this wide paintbrush gives me the ability to get big chunks of area painted all at once, and it kind of makes it look like grasses that are, you know, maybe blown over, pressed down, or moving this way and that way, and just helps it make it look a little bit more wild and overgrown. Any kind of a wide flat brush will do the trick if you don't have a 5/8 inch angle. Just don't scrub it out so much like we did in the sky. I'm even overlapping some of my green. And let's start moving toward that green. So I threw a tiny bit of yellow in. Same type of brushwork. A little bit more green. Just keeping all of my brush, every time my brush touches the canvas, it's in a bit of a different position or moves in a different direction than the last one. Even more yellow. clean brush, picking up some Payne's Gray. And just throwing a little bit of orange in there, just because it seemed like the thing to do. It makes it a bit more opaque and just kind of takes away that stark, almost black appearance of the Payne's Gray. I'm doing similar type of brushwork that I did in the grass. In this area here, I decided I kind of wanted to make it look like exposed dirt and rocks, things like that. All these dark areas on the banks of the water, I'm giving this dark color too. Kind of helps them feel popped up off of the ground, so, or off of the level of the water. So if you were standing on the ground and you look down at the water, there would be, I kind of got the idea of about 12, 18 inches between where you were standing and the surface of the water. And just reinforcing some of my other shadowy areas. Nice and transparent here. Just to bring it up a little bit higher. Almost glazing that super transparent Payne's Gray onto this side of the hill because I feel like it would be taking quite a bit of shadow. And same over here, might be a little bit more shadowed. Super transparent, lots of medium in with that Payne's Gray here. Let's really bring the shadow reflection down on that left-hand side. A little more of that muddy brown mixture. Just whatever colors you have to mix up to get it. I think I even throw a little of the cobalt teal in here. Don't be afraid, mix them all together. It might seem weird to have such a muddy color in such a colorful painting, but to really make your bright colors sing and be as vibrant and as exciting as you want them to be, you have to have some grayer, darker, less exciting colors in there. If everything is screaming for your attention, nothing is going to get your attention. Cleaned off my brush. I'm going back to my number 4. Getting some yellow and some white. And we're going to work on the light reflections in the water again. Nice warm color there with a bit of orange. Just suggestions of that color throughout the top part of the water here. And absolutely let it overlap that dark color. It's that streaking and smearing together in the water that gives it the believable look that it is water that's reflecting light and shadow. Clean brush again. Mixing up our orange-purple mixture, a little stronger on the side of the orange. And we're going to get our tree reflection in here. I'm not trying to make it the same shape and everything. You don't necessarily want to see the exact tree in the water. I'm just generally putting a similar color in a similar space. All right, now I'm going to go to my short handle number 8 Filbert. So this is my soft detail brush, And we're really going to start amping up a little bit of the texture of the grasses. So I'm mixing up just a basic green color there. It's not too blue, it's not too yellow. And very flat, I'm going to kind of rub on a thicker application of that paint, but trying to keep it still pretty loose. Just breaking up some of the edges. Little medium. Just helps smear things in a really pretty way. See, now you can see those three weird little alcoves. They're all the exact same size, the exact same shape, the exact same distance apart, and it looks really awkward. But I'm gonna fix it up super quick. A little bit more yellow. And every time I brighten it, I apply a little less of it than before. Nice and transparent. Just adding a bunch of medium to that color on my brush and just kind of glazing a little scumble here and there. Not in the distance though. Okay, I lied a tiny bit in the distance, but it's so transparent. Throwing a little bit of cerulean in there, which the cerulean with the yellow, it does not make the vibrant green that it does with the teal, which reads a little bit better for the distance. It's a little bit grayer. I always recommend cerulean for creating distance. If you need to paint something that's in the distance and you can't figure out what colors to use to make it appear grayer and more washed out, add a bit of cerulean to it or use cerulean in place of whatever other blue you're using. It's an excellent distance color. I did not clean off my brush. I don't know if you noticed that. I still have that blue and green on my brush, and I just picked up some of my orange. It's just giving me a nice highlight color for some of these muddy colors that I made. So like these rocks over here, just doing some kind of vertical brush strokes on a slight bit of an angle, and it's, to me, it kind of reads as highlights on the faces of some rocks. Add a little bit of purple to that mix. It'll just be a bit more vibrant. And let's do some very teeny horizontal brush strokes in the water here. It can look like little bits of debris floating on the surface of the water, leaves or grasses or whatever. And I experimented with a few different techniques here, and you'll see there's a technique that I tried a couple of times and did not like it. So while you're doing this part, because this part can be a little bit nerve-wracking, I suggest that you keep a clean, very slightly damp brush handy. That way if you do something that you're like, nope, that has to go, that looks really bad, you can just quickly wipe it away before it dries. And I'm just going to mix up different versions of this orange. Some is a little bit brighter with some yellow, some's going to be a little bit darker with some purple. And I'm just making these small horizontal dashes and then lightly streaking most of them out with my finger, just to give them a bit of a smear. Even taking it up into the grass, creating some little flowers or something. Just little dabs. This part was kind of an afterthought, and I thought, well, if this looks bad, it's not a big deal. I'll just put a little bit more of the green over top of it, but I ended up really liking it. So I'm lightening that color just a little bit with some white and some more yellow, and I'm just going to add a little bit of variation to some of those little flowers that I made. And a little extra highlight on my rocks. Same messy brush, just picking up some yellow and some white. I did not clean it off. All right, now my brush is clean. Mixing up some of my teal and my cerulean. Good amount of medium, nice and transparent. And I'm just gonna overlap those flowers just a tiny bit because right now they almost look plopped on top of the grass. And I just want them to feel like they're part of this overgrown grassy area. So just a couple brush strokes to overlap them a little bit. A little bit of green, we're going to do the exact same thing. It's just assimilating them into the grass. All right, back to the clean number 8 Filbert, some Pains and some Diox purple, super dark color, a little bit of orange, and we're just going to keep going with the little bits floating on the top of the water. mixing all kinds of colors in there. And shaping this back river. All right, here's where I started to get really experimental. I'm going to splatter some of this color on there. I thought, well, I'll just splatter it and streak out the splatters. Friends, let me tell you, it did not work out. So don't do what I'm doing right now unless you're super confident in your splatter streaking abilities. If you do try it, keep that damp brush near your easel, because like I did here, no, I did not like that. But it's gone now. So why I decided that I didn't like that and yet went and did it again after cleaning it off, I don't know. But I left it in because I wanted you to see that it's okay to experiment, and it's okay to do something that you don't like, something that's kind of yucky. Because if you catch it in enough time, you can repair it. And I think that the experience of trying something is more valuable than thinking about it and just thinking, oh, no, I'm afraid, and not doing it. There's nothing wrong with just doing it. Just try it. Back to a little bit of that sky color. This is where we're really going to start building that river in the back. Very small brushwork. Don't fill in this whole river with this bright blue color or with this super light blue color, because it will stand out way too much. It's just a few little horizontal dashes. I streak out one side, typically the bottom side. I'm going to make a couple little angle marks to make it look like it's flowing down over some rocks. That's really all I'm doing back there. And right here is that trick that I told you we were going to do to make it obvious what is reflected shadow on the surface of the water and what is land. So I have a lot of medium in this mixture. It's a very transparent color. See, I'm going to mix a little more in there. And then very lightly, I'm glazing it horizontally over the top of this and smearing it out over top of that shadow color too. See that? Now you can tell magically. You know what is water and what is land. And it's a very, very simple technique. I'm going to do that over a good portion of this water. It looks like I'm moving at an angle here. It's just because the camera's off to an angle. These are horizontal brush marks. They match the bottom edge of the canvas. So make sure you're not doing it at an angle. Just some extra medium. That line was a little bit too much. There we go. Just a tiny bit more in this back river before we move on. Cleaned off my brush, going into my purple and my orange. Nice dark, heavy on the purple mixture. Just a few more little floaty bits on the top of the water. Up close, those floaty bits kind of look a mess, but I think they read really well at a distance, so I left them. So if your floaty bits look a bit of a mess while you're up close painting it, I highly recommend you stand back 5-6 feet or so and look at it there. And if it looks good at that distance, leave it, no matter what you think it looks like up close. All right, clean brush again. Still using my number 8 Filbert. We're just gonna mix up some yellow, a tiny poke of orange to really warm it up, and a good amount of white. We're gonna get the brightest reflection in our water. I'm gonna use just a little bit of a heavier application of paint than I did before. Just a bit of medium right on the end. It's not blended in. It just helps with the streaking. All right, we're gonna move on to the long liner. So I'm just getting paints. I have a little extra water because it makes the paint flow better on the long liner if you use a little extra water. Tiny bit of the cobalt, simply because I'm gonna be putting this color in the grasses, so I don't want it to appear just stark, solid Payne's gray. And in these little flowery areas, I'm just scratching the tiniest suggestion of leaves or stems. You could skip this part if you really want. I don't know how much of it actually shows, but it's not a lot. A little medium to make it more transparent. The water makes it flow, the medium makes it transparent. Tiny poke of white. My brush is cleaned. I did clean it off. And I kind of thought it would be nice just put some little white dotty bits around some of these flowers. back to the number 8. Some teal, kind of running out of spaces to work in here. Mixing it in some yellow for that nice bright green color. Little extra water, you know where this is going. As always, you can skip it if you want. But I am gonna flick just a little bit over top of this. It adds to the overgrown look. And I don't like to waste paint, so the paint that got on my finger from splattering, I'm just wiping it into a few areas. Back to the long liner, just getting panes, a little extra water so it flows nicely. And we are going to do our tree trunks and branches. Let this brush wobble, let it make jagged marks. That's how you're going to get the most realistic kind of scraggy trees. If you try and control this brush too much, if you choke down on the tip of the brush and use it really like a pencil, you're going to get very smooth, very controlled, very stiff looking trees. Notice I'm encouraging the tip of that brush to do what it wants by I'm kind of bouncing my hand a little as I go. The harder you press, the wider your line is going to be. So if you want a nice wide trunk, press nice and firm on that brush. If you want little tiny hairline branches, keep your pressure very light so it's just the tip of the brush touching the canvas, which can be a little challenging, but with practice, I feel like you should be able to do it. Tiny poke of white, just kind of rolling some of it off, and we'll give the main tree, the main trunk, a bit of a highlight. And that is a bit aggressive, so a bit more of the panes just to smear it in so that it's not just a big white stripe down one side of the tree. Same thing on this side. We're going to do the exact same process. Here I'm going to use that same Payne's medium mixture on my brush, and I'm going to use my brush flat. I'm pressing the entire length of the long liner to the canvas and kind of flicking upwards. It just gives me a very natural grassy look, I think. Much better than trying to use the tip of the brush to draw grasses, which I think looks very stiff and artificial. All right, let's add a little bit more color, some more foliage to the face of our trees. So I know you can't see it, but I'm using my number 8 short handle Filbert, and I'm mixing up my orange color again. This is going to be a little bit brighter. It's also a little bit thicker than before. I did not add any medium. And as you can see, I'm adding this paint thicker. So these leaves are going to be the leaves that are closest to us as the viewers. I'm not going to cover this entire tree with them, just enough to really give you the point, cover a little bit of the branches so that they feel like they exist inside of the tree and not on top of it. As I move toward the left, obviously, I'm mixing a little extra purple in there to maintain that shadow side. A little bit of extra water. You know what's about to happen. You don't have to do it if you don't want to. And if you get a little bit of orange splatter here and there, I think it's okay because it can just look like leaves that are blowing off or falling off of the tree. Make sure you mix enough water in there that the paint flows a bit, and just a light flick. I just like that extra bit of texture. Same thing over here. I already started on it, but I wasn't paying attention, so you didn't get to see it. But I'm really doing the same thing, just mixing it heavier on the purple side. And I don't do the splatter on this tree. You wouldn't really see it anyway. Obviously, small variations each time I go back for more paint. Some is a little more orange, some is a little more purple. Just getting some of the highlight color that I used on the purple tree makes the perfect dark shadow color for the orange tree. We're just going to touch up a couple of things on the ground here. Just still that Payne's gray on my number 8. Adding a bit of blue to it, nice dark, dark blue color. It was the cerulean blue. It just makes a nice transition between the grass and the dark shadow color. All right, let's finish up the sky. Clean brush, mixing my yellow and my white. We're gonna really pop the brightest area in the sky. I know you can't see it, but it's the same mixture. I'm just mixing it up a little bit thicker this time, and I won't be using any medium. Nice thick application there, overlapping my tree still. Just picking up some white. And a tiny bit of medium just to help it blend a bit. All right, so at this point, I was pretty happy with the painting and I decided that I was done, so I signed it. But wait, there's more. I am not, in fact, done. The next day I came back and I decided we need to work on that left bank. So I'm kind of using my hand there to see which one of those little alcoves I want to take out. And I decided it was that middle one. So this is only going to take a second. We're going to get rid of it. So that's just cerulean blue. Maybe a little bit of medium, just kind of painting out the little shadow of the alcove. Overlapping it into those other greens. And then I'm just slowly adding some teal and a hint of yellow, just like I did to build up that green. I'm trying to pay attention to the edge of the land to make sure that I don't create another strange shape that I don't like. Just building that yellow until it's the bright green that I want. And then I think it was pretty dang good. So overall, I'm very happy with this painting. I do have a couple other painting ideas that I want to work on along these lines. So you will probably be seeing more paintings in this vein very soon. I'm kind of on a landscape kick, so I hope you are as well. Thank you so much for watching, everyone, and I hope to see you again very, very soon.